Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. What an honor to have so many persons who are in the world of writing. Poetry is something that I wish I had the power to do. I admire what they do. I admire the emphasis that they put and how they bring clarity to our lives. Yet, through their words, sometimes it sounds confusing, but in fact, they unveil so much so that we can see. From a political science point of view, usually when a dictator takes over, usually the poets are the first ones that they seek out and put them aside because they can see what's going on. Before we get started with Thelma T. Reyna, who is going to bring on and introduce the wonderful poets we're going to hear today, I have a small poem to share myself. It's from Octavio Paz. To read a poem is to hear it with your eyes. To hear it is to see it with your ears. And that's what we're going to do today. Thelma, thank you very much for bringing this wonderful chord together.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk just for a few minutes about how we all came together. When we started hearing about the pandemic striking Europe, Asia, the rest of the world before it came to our shores, we were all concerned. We knew that this was a historic event. We saw the huge suffering and loss that was going on all around the world. So when it struck our shores, sometime late February, early March, I thought that we poets, as Armando says, we are oftentimes the front responders in a time of catastrophe, a time of upheaval. Poets, I believe, are the first responders. So I had an idea for an anthology. I felt that as time progressed, and especially months into the pandemic, that a lot of books would be coming out about this event. But I wanted us poets, people I know, people I wanted to reach out to start recording our experiences, our observations, to be the original witnesses, so to speak, to what was striking our nation, how things were unwrapping, unraveling, and devolving. So I wanted to do this with a quick timeline. I had it in my head that I wanted our book to come out in September. So this is in late March. So sometime in March, I reached out to 50 authors, poets, prose writers that I know from across America. And I personally invited them through email, letters, phone calls, whatever, to please send me, I described the project, and asked them to send in some poems, send in some essays, send in some short fiction, and to just share with us their thoughts, their feelings, their fears, their hopes, their experiences, what they were seeing around. So in essence, we would be writing a book about this pandemic in real time. And that is basically what happened. Out of those original 50, 45 responded that yes, they would like to participate. So our book is about 268 pages long. It has about 115 pieces in it, most of it poetry. And it has, as Hazel was saying, personal essays, and there is one short fiction piece. So this is our observation, our historical first person, subjective recording of this pandemic. And we're hoping that readers down the road and readers now will find it useful to them. So this is how we came to be. So each author in the book was hand selected. And I could not believe, I was so humbled, so happy and appreciative that these outstanding people said yes, and that we are all together in this book. And so for the readings that we are doing, I broke up our authors into various clusters according to what you are expert in, what your career has shown a lot of, what your distinction is in the field of writing. And one of the clusters was Poets Laureate. So this is our Poets Laureate groups. Upcoming, we have academics, professors, teachers of writing. We also have another presentation where it's going to be poet leaders who are podcasters, bloggers, event organizers, editors, and publishers. And then we're going to have a segment of prose writers and multi-genre authors. So, and we had another group to start with. So by the time that by the end of next week, all of our authors in the pandemic book will have had the opportunity to share their work with the world. And I am so thankful to each of you for having come on this journey with us all together and for being in these Zooms to share your writings. Now, I'd like to start with our first reader, and I'd like to share that wonderful poet and essayist's biography. And our first reader today is Hazel Clayton Harrison. She was an Altadena Library Poet Laureate from 2018 to 2020, and she writes poetry and prose on love, nature, family relationships, and social injustice themes. She enjoys gardening, sharing her poetry at readings, and spending time with friends and family. Her latest book, Down Freedom Road, which I absolutely love, was published by Shabda Press, and it is available on jawlightmedia.com, shabdapress.com, and amazon.com. So now, without further ado, Hazel Clayton Harrison.
Thank you so much, Thelma, for inviting me here tonight. And thank you, Armando, for doing this production. And thank you to all of the poets laureates. It's such an honor to be here amongst such wonderful writers. I'm going to read an excerpt from one piece that's in this wonderful book, When the Virus Came Calling. And it is about a pivotal moment during the past, since the virus got started. It's called 8 minutes, 46 seconds on 38th and Chicago. When my husband Kevin and I moved to Minneapolis in the mid-1970s with our 5-year-old daughter, we were refugees escaping the racism and bigotry of the Deep South. After graduating with a business degree, Kevin had accepted a supervisory job with an agricultural shipping company in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had both lived in Ohio for most of our lives, and I was apprehensive about moving south. But job opportunities were scarce in Ohio, and I was determined to make the best of the relocation. When Kevin's life was threatened by white employees because he tried to transfer some Black workers out of the hazardous grain bins and replace them with white workers, I knew it was time to leave. I'll never forget the note he found in his locker. Written on yellow notepaper in large block letters were the words, "Nigga, go home or you'll be alligator bait." I'd had enough. I convinced Kevin to request a transfer. Within a few weeks, we arrived in South Minneapolis, a few blocks away from the now infamous corner of East 38th Street and Chicago Avenue. Fast forward to May 27, 2020. I am living in the Los Angeles area. There's a familiar, sickening, gut-wrenching feeling in the pit of my stomach as I watch on TV the video of the May 25th lynching of an unarmed Black man in Minneapolis on the corner of 38th and Chicago. The same corner I used to walk by every day. The man's name is George Floyd. He lies prone on the pavement, both hands cuffed behind his back, while a cop presses a knee into his neck, and 2 others pin him down with the full weight of their bodies. Another cop stands guard during the gathering, daring the gathering crowd to interfere with his brutal, unconscionable murder in broad daylight. As the video recorded by 17-year-old Darnella Frazier rolls, George's voice can be heard crying out, "I can't breathe. Mama, they're killing me." For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the cop pressed his knee into George Floyd's neck. It was the longest 8 minutes and 46 seconds I've ever lived. This poem is entitled "This in Annihilation." There is in this annihilation an opening, a wind whirling a ship out to sea. After the wedding, the bride and groom return home to tend the hearth and make bread. Somehow the honey tastes sweeter. This dying and being reborn leaves me breathless, drifting in a dreamless sleep. I feel the fire on my beloved's lips. I am smoke drifting through an open door.
Former Poet Laureate of Altadena, California in 2018 to 2020, Theresa May Chuck is the author of 3 full-length collections of poetry. She was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and immigrated to the US under political asylum with her mother and brother shortly after the end of the Vietnam War. Since the age of 2, Theresa grew up in the Tong Va village of Hahamongna, which is now Pasadena, California, where she still lives. Theresa is a graduate of the Master's in Fine Arts and Creative Writing program in poetry at Goddard College in Plainfield, Vermont, and she teaches literature and writing at a public high school in Los Angeles. We're proud to have Theresa May Chuck with us.
Thank you, Thelma. I was very honored when Thelma asked me to write some poems about my current experience during COVID-19 pandemic. And as Thelma mentioned, I'm a high school English teacher in Los Angeles Unified School District. It was a very difficult transition for a lot of my students, 11th and 12th graders, as well as for me. I've actually been on Zoom all day today. So that's from about 8:30 to 2:30, pretty much straight through. We have half an hour for lunch and 5 minutes in between classes. So I'm very grateful that Thelma included my voice, and I have an opportunity to let the world know what teachers and students are experiencing. It's only gotten more challenging, but we are supporting each other and being as resilient as we can. Teaching during COVID-19. I saw my high school students for the first time about a week after the schools shut down to curb the spread of COVID-19. Seeing my students on Zoom and hearing their voices, listening to their worries, laughter, and stories was so healing, even on a computer screen. One of my students messaged me that both of her parents and her brother lost their jobs. The other day, a student messaged me from Honey Baked Ham, where she is an essential worker, and said she can't make it to Zoom class because she is working and is sending this message during her 10-minute break. My 12th grade student tells me that their year ended on March 13th, the last day of school before closures. Others agree. They miss being able to experience prom, graduation ceremony, grad night in the same way as students in previous years. Several students tell me that they are busy helping to watch their younger siblings and helping them with their school assignments. I wonder how they can juggle so much. We don't know how long this stay-at-home order will last. the governor says through summer for sure, perhaps through fall and winter. My students' shoes. I try to walk in my students' shoes, stay there a while. The one who is struggling, whose mother is terminally sick, the one who has a younger sister to take care of, the student whose father is gone, the student who wears the same black sweatshirt every day because that's his only one. The student who asks if I have food because he's so hungry. The student with tattered shoes so worn there are holes in them. The student who loves to play guitar and often wears an Iron Maiden t-shirt. So many pairs of shoes to walk in while I am at home sitting in front of a computer screen teaching.
Aline Lipkin, Ph.D., is a research scholar with UCLA Center for the Study of Women and teaches poetry workshops in Los Angeles. Her poetry has been published in a range of contemporary journals, and she has been a resident at IADO, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, as well as the Dorland Mountain Arts Colony. She is the author of The Errant Thread and Gross Studies. She was the Poet Laureate of Altadena, California from 2016 through 2018.
Great. Thank you so much, Thelma and Armando. And what a pleasure to be in the company of all these Poets Laureate. It's really an amazing thing. And I'm thrilled to be included in the book. So I'll read two poems. The first is called Pandemic Hygge. In the US, we sometimes say Haig, but hygge is the Danish word for coziness or kind of being inside and having kind of a warm feeling inside your house. And that's part of the title. And I also mention FOMO, which some of you may know, fear of missing out, an acronym. And I wrote this poem early on in the pandemic when it was so abrupt and shocking that everything was canceled, all our activities, everything we did, we just had to be in. And I'm trying to reference a little bit the feeling of retreat from the world that we sort of had, but all the while contrasted with the intense anxiety and worry, knowing that this pandemic and disease was lurking right outside the door. Pandemic hygge. Before, we were often out, or if in, FOMOing over things missed, breakneck busy, a whirl. Now, laptops humming, side by side, we settle. Orange scented candle, hot honeyed tea. This scene could be a lamp bright lit against night's dark, each window a porthole circled on the side of a ship, a sweep of beams from a lighthouse combing over black water. We tuck into couch, blanketed by long hours, try to wrap against menace, invisible, unbidden, the still light scratch of the lurker we know is pacing just outside the front door. And the second poem I'll read is called COVID Con Marie, and it makes reference to Marie Kondo, many of you may know, who's sort of an organizing guru known worldwide. And this is a few months in toward April, and I mentioned Passover in the poem, when people were sort of a little more perhaps accepting of the reality. We would just be indoors for a while, and I feel like there was a rash of articles and movements about organizing your space and making it comfortable. And I did join a COVID Con Marie group, which was promptly derailed when the organizer actually got COVID herself and recovered. But we were all trying to kind of improve our spaces as it became clear we would be inside for a long while. COVID Con Marie. Stuck inside, we are worrying, moving the furniture, cleaning the before never noticed cobwebs, hypotenusing triangles at the corners of doors. We are trying to purge worry, sort photos, attempt to tame the mountain of what now seems like useless mail, practice gratitude in ways that won't make our eyes roll. Cocooning is not the right word, more like taking refuge, wombed inside the bleached walls of our once fingerprint world homes. The week of Passover, we bleach counters, let ammonia be blood on the doorframe, chase hametz from the cupboards, cup a palm over the firstborn. To say no, pass by. We left out a full cup to offer the stranger, but this plague is not welcome here.
Linda Dove holds a Ph.D. in Renaissance literature and teaches college writing. She is also an award-winning author of 4 books, In Defense of Objects, Oh Dear Dear, This Too, and Fern, as well as a scholarly collection of essays, Women, Writing, and the Reproduction of Culture in Tudor and Stuart Britain. Linda's poems have been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, the Robert H. Winter Award from the Poetry Society of America, the Best of the Net, and Best Microfiction. She serves as the faculty editor of Mariah Literary Magazine at Woodbury University in Los Angeles, where she also teaches. Linda Dove.
Thank you, Thelma. Thank you, Armando, for this opportunity. And thank you to the other Poets Laureate for sharing this space with me today. I don't have more than one poem. I just have one poem in the book. I don't have a copy of the book, but I do have a copy of the poem. This was a poem that I wrote collaboratively with a friend of mine, Angie Voorhees. At the start of the pandemic, we find ourselves in the desert. The moon opened over my bed like a dangerous blossom, a corolla, a whirl unfurled, a silver pistol pointed this way. In the desert, everything is aiming for your life. I have come here to sleep among the Joshua trees, where a small bird lands in between the pricked leaves, a flare of iridescent green and violet, spread like an infection across the neck. It's hard to stop moving when your heart beats 500 times a minute. It's hard to stop feeling like you're running out of time. Here on Serrano land, after the Spanish, after smallpox, it's all bayonets and spines. The news has us on edge. The WHO, who declared the outbreak a pandemic today, named it Corona, spikes orbiting the virus like a crown. How a cactus wren builds a nest inside a teddy bear cholla. How we hope to take shelter in a world of thorns. Thank you.
Edward Vidaurre is the author of 7 collections of poetry. His new book of poems is Pandemia and Other Poems, by the way, a book I love, from Aslan Libre Press in 2020. He is a 2018-2019 City of McAllen, Texas Poet Laureate. He is also a 4-time Pushcart Prize nominated poet and publisher of Flower Song Press. Vidaurre resides in McAllen, Texas with his wife. He was recently nominated to be Poet Laureate of the state of Texas.
I'll be reading 2 poems. My first poem is titled, After We Choke and the Virus Leaves Us, We Return to the River Song. When I think of our river, I don't see boats. It's not a body of water either. More like blood, like a swirl of intestines, shoes without laces, strings and beads of scapular and rosary. No water, not our river, more like blood, like a distant song, a lone guitar strum, a floating tombstone. The looming branches of the Anaqua take pity on this floating spine, not a river, not a river at all, more like a drool. My next poem is titled God Is. God is an open wound, a kung fu movie and a celestial sicario. God made our president with leftover road cotton and grackle droppings. His sandals are of leftover human skin from the factory of suicide rock stars. Today he wears the kneecaps of Janus to match his UFO belt. God is unfazed at 3 p.m. He whispers to me from a 6 feet distance. God lays naked on steel surfaces with his long hair covering the shadow of men. God has a sticker on his chest that reads, I voted. He's nonchalant. He has a twin. She does all the good work. 2. God is your God's God. Yoga and breathing. She is the breath of life. Latex gloves and exhaling the sun over mountains. She is the blamed, the curve, the torn Achilles heel. God is a beat poet, the coming strain, the big question, the control, the last minute mind changer, the finger on the gun, the safety switch. God is the ultimate filter, the event planner, the street cleaner, the thing in the sky that was there and then was not, the ventilator, the death toll. She knows the bodies are coming. 3. God is language, a lisp and a stutterer. God has Down syndrome, the autistic genius, the only child. From the other side of the tracks, have you ever thought of God as old? The wrinkled hobo and toothless smoker, the girl next door, the square jawed bad hombre, creator of a new earth between ellipses, growing peonies on hyphens. God is soil and water, the trans angel, the monk making booze, the anorexic gargoyle breaking off a ledge, the movement in the painting. God's number is 8 digits behind iron bars, the noisemaker, the vuvuzuela in purgatory, guilty. God is doing time. 4. God is a found poem in exile, an unbelievable truth, an asteroid belt crash, mammoth, that sound, that silence. 5. God is tired of rising on Easter. God is trying to figure out the diameter of this pandemic, writing ghostly hymns for the dead. Did you know God was the celestial laureate? Skywritings, the sounds you hear in the morning, of birds and wind chimes, speeding cars and barking dogs. Did you think the sound was just that? Commotion? God writes those sounds into existence every day. I know when God is in a Motown mood, a hippie rock, or just a lounging jazz mood, and when it's too quiet, God let the whiskey get the better of him. 6. God likes to drink with me, and I listen.
Mary Langer Thompson's articles, short stories, and poetry appear in various journals and anthologies. Dr. Thompson is a contributor to Women and Poetry, tips on writing, teaching, and publishing by successful women poets. And she was the 2012 Senior Poet Laureate of California. A retired principal and English teacher, she now teaches full-time in Apple Valley, California, where she received the Jack London Award in 2019 from the High Desert branch of the California Writers Club. Here is Mary Langer Thompson.
Thank you, Thelma and Armando. It's good to see you again. I think that when Thelma first invited us to include poems in this book. We didn't know how even harder getting through this time would be. And I really have to hand it to the educators. I'm retired now, but the educators who have gone through the virtual teaching, I really don't know how you've done it and continue to do it. I tip my hat to you. And I'm going to read two poems today. The first is called Wreaths of Garlic. It's the more serious one of the two. And it has to do with the little town of Gilroy, if you've ever been through that. Gilroy, California. Wreaths of Garlic. The Israelites in the wilderness longed for the garlic of Egypt. But I have the stinking rose of Gilroy. I was afraid my purchase would rid my vehicle of new car smell, but the college girl offered to double wrap it. The herb had no sacred power that day. Did the clove lose its clout to ward off evil? Demons and la maldad? Perhaps we need to start wearing garlands or smear broken bits on windows and doors for fertility and magic protection of our hearts. Let's hang braids in birthing and sick rooms, swags in kitchens, and serve it generously to our families to lower our blood pressure. Let's chew cloves before entering battlefields and before our night journeys to conjure dreams of something we lost long ago. Let's breathe the scent again, even as we scatter seeds among pandemic graves and hang wreaths on each locked door where grief resides. My second poem is a little lighter, and it's after E.E. Cummings, called In Just. In just, sequestered spring, when the world is toilet paper manic, the small hobbled masked man wheezes near and far, and Trump and Pence have lost their marbles and luscious loot, and it's sequestered spring, when the world is bottled water awful. The queer old masked man wheezes near and far, and Nancy and Diane come dancing from Fargo and Mexican trains, and it's sequestered spring, and the cloven-hooved masked man wheezes far and near. Thank you.
This poem is called The V That Marks Us. Birds of a feather, you and I, trading out feathers for lines crisscrossing cheeks and foreheads like roadways and AAA brochures, tracking journeys our bodies have trekked, earthbound and piercing clouds. I see you walking by my house, back curved to ground, permed hair a gray corona shading the paper mask you wear, dented aluminum legs you push squeaking over cracks, trembling your twig body with each conquered step. There is a V that marks us both, one etched deep between our eyes, you and me, birds of a feather, the ensconced frown our tribulations carved on us through 6, 7, 8 decades, building nests for shaking beaks, eye beads focused on our food and sheltering wings. There is the other V, frightening our bones, invading homes. The V doctors intone as TVs show scores and scores of birds like us pushed on gurneys, breathing masks shaded by corona hair, wired and scared. The V that politicians tout to minimize our toll. The V that tells our deaths were near. That proves the air our bird twig bodies occupied is not a chasm slicing generations off the human map. The V counting us dispensable. I see you and other birds, all of us masked, watching the ground we tremulously tread, seeking signs that our lives count, reaching for the unlined hands, scanning uncreased cheeks, telling our hearts, these won't abscond. They will not forget. Thank you very much to all of these poets, wonderful poet laureates. We can see now why they were chosen for that position in their different cities at different times. And I'm just so honored and so glad that we have all been able to share their wonderful writing. And I thank them again for being with us, and thank Armando too. Next, we're going to have like closing statements from all of the writers here today. We are just going to share very openly with you any thoughts that we have about this book project that we worked on, or about the pandemic itself, about our own writings, anything that is in our hearts and in our minds at this point. And we're just going to throw it open to discussion. So whoever wishes to speak up, go ahead, just raise your hand and pipe up, and we're going to enjoy sharing this closing commentary with one another. Teresa.
Hi, Thelma. Thank you so much again, you and Armando, and thank you to Poets Laureates. This really made my day. It was a breath of fresh air to listen to your poems. And I think one of the important elements of this pandemic that has raised our awareness is that our human connection is so essential. And I think that's what this book also brings to us, the human connection. And even though I'm seeing you on screen, and this is most of the extent of my human connection right now is on screen, but I think one beautiful thing about poetry is that it touches our hearts and our souls. So not only does it transcend language, but it also transcends the screen and hearing your voices. Even though it's different if I were able to see you in person, it's still very moving and very beautiful. And I really appreciate that human connection that I was able to have today with everyone. And I think that's what's going to get us through this. And even as I teach with my students, and some students I've never met in person before, and just last week, I actually broke down crying because we were having a discussion reading The Pedestrian by Ray Bradbury about this science fiction world, which seems like now where people are on their screens and nobody's reading books. And I told them that I used to think that this would be my dream job, just to be able to be at home and work from home. But I realized after a few months that staring into a screen the whole day is not living. It's not what I want to do. And I can't wait to see my students again. And I think they are also really looking forward to seeing each other again.
I think that that's so true for poets, because most poets that I know are introverts, and we enjoy our alone time. We find it essential, in fact, to writing. And so for me, just to piggyback on what Teresa was saying, I think the pandemic has taught me that, no man is an island unto himself, to quote John Donne, that I need human connection. I might be an introvert, but that doesn't mean that I can survive or thrive, certainly, without having a sense of connection to other people. And it's just essential. And it's really transformed the way that I think of myself, my own identity, because I would have completely described myself differently 8 or 9 months ago from how I just would describe myself now. And so to say that the pandemic has had an effect is, I think, an understatement.
One thought is, I've enjoyed, I love going to poetry readings all the time to hear the poet, to feel their energy, to feel collective energy. But I have enjoyed that people have been so inventive and creative, creating events like this, and being able to attend readings. I'm going to attend a reading in Texas later this week, and how thrilling that Edward could join us from Texas, and took a writing class myself with a teacher in Minneapolis. So in a way, there's no question, but I do feel like the inventiveness of the literary community has been really striking. And a few friends who've had this, and that's been exciting. So despite our constriction, I feel like there's also been expansion where we can now tune in, tap into events, on opposite coasts, or attend things and support friends, poets, writers we otherwise may not have the opportunity to be with or to see.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, just piggybacking on what you're saying, Elaine, is that I feel the world, but in other words, it's expanded it, writing, but I also feel like I'm on this journey, and it's such an honor. You guys, the poets in our community, when I hear your stories, it makes me feel like I'm not alone ways, and it makes me feel very honored and very, very humbled, actually, to be a part of a writing community, and to have such, wonderful people to be a part of that journey. Because of course, I also have my family, and I have some close friends that I talk to by phone. So, and then also, I think that the book is so important because, things are going by so quickly. And I think at some point we forget what happened yesterday or the day, books such as When the Virus Came Calling, and be able to pick up and remember some of the events and that have occurred along the way in the people. So it's really been an amazing experience.
Yes, I agree with that it's made all of my groups more inventive. And so our Writers Club has done, like Linda, with her Exquisite Corpse collaborative poem. We have done Mondo poems and opened it up to the whole club. And those are just 3-line poems with answers, like little Zen things. And we had some of them published, but other people in the club say, hey, I can write poetry. I never thought I could write poetry. And just starting with that short little form, it's just broadened people thinking they can do what we do and go from there. And that's been good. And another group an educators group has done Secret Sisters, and we leave little things on doorsteps for each other. And, if the window's open, wave. And it's just been a lot of blessing coming along with the isolation and people being inventive and thinking of ways to connect.
I'll add a little bit here to the discussion that I'm not a poet. I'm just an honor to be in a circle of them. But the discussion went on about how do we respond to the whole world of isolation. But I really do have to go back and say, I think all of us should reread Robinson Crusoe. And to make it a little bit easier, I would recommend watching Castaways again. And I think we were being told that, what we have should be appreciated. And I think we didn't get that message until now, till we were all hit in the face worldwide as well. So let us, yes, we can see what we miss and what we don't have, but we're still here dealing with each other. And imagine the time if the internet had not been at this level where we could do this as well. That's just frightens me a little bit, but that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and I think a silver lining behind the cloud here has been that because of all the inventiveness and our need to try to find different ways of connecting and all of these self-revealing things that have been going on, another thing that has happened that might seem like it's the opposite direction of that is that I feel and I see, like in my neighborhood, a lot of people reverting to simpler times, simpler things. For example, walking the dog, being outdoors, going to the park, going to the arboretum or the gardens, or being out in nature a little bit more. We've had to simplify because of our restrictiveness. And at the same time, that is also, I think, being a little bit cathartic, because I love nature and I think it's one of the greatest balms there is. But it's also putting us in touch with simpler ways of connecting, simpler ways of communicating, simpler ways of living our lives. So that's one thing that I'm very grateful for, very thankful for. So thank you so much for sharing all of these things, and please keep in touch. If you have a chance, you might want to also tune in to the remaining Zoom groups that we have from our anthology's authors. I'll be issuing some reminders as to when those are going to be soon. So thank you, and thank you, Armando. Thank you for all your supportiveness over the years. It's been great. Thank you so much. And here's the book. Probably the fastest, best, easiest way to get this book is through our press's website. And so if you just go to www.goldenfoothillspress.com, as soon as the site opens, you will see this on the opening page. It's available there. It's also available on Amazon.com. That's a big link, but if you just go to Amazon, click on books, click on either my name, Thelma T. Reyna, or on When the Virus Came Calling, and it will pop right up too. I'm a believer in supporting indie bookstores as well. So you might just go to your indie bookstore and just ask them to please place an order for you. So that'll be another good opportunity for you to walk around the store and visit and catch up. So thank you so much for all of your supportiveness. And I look forward to hearing any questions that you all might have. And thanks again to all of our authors for all your wonderful, excellent work.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. You have heard some outstanding poets and individuals who share their hearts and their passion and their hearts on paper, but they extend themselves through their readings, through their emotions, through their passions for what they're trying to tell us as how to be human. And yes, we are in difficult times and we accept that, but we are going to make it. And I think a part of the process of healing will be to continue listening to poets like yourselves as well. I wish you continued success. I'm Armando F. Sanchez. Thank you for being on our program. You can contact me at afsanchez66@gmail.com. Any information you want to send me to forward to these wonderful writers, or you can go directly to their websites, please, you can do so. Thank you very much for being with us. We look forward to highlighting more poets. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. It was so good to see you all and to hear you all. I loved it. Thank you so much. Okay, bye. Thank you.
Adios. Bye, folks.